All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into Umberto Eco's massive bestseller, The Name of the Rose. Now, you probably know the surface level plot, right? It's this thrilling, tightly wound 14th century murder mystery set in a really remote monastery. But Eco, who is an absolutely brilliant professor, hid incredibly deep philosophical layers beneath all the blood and the cloaks. So today we're going to peel back those layers and figure out what this book is actually trying to tell us.
Take a look at this haunting Latin phrase. It's the very final line of the novel, and it translates to, "The ancient rose remains through its name, the naked name we have." It's beautifully poetic, but what does it actually mean? Well, that right there is the true mystery. As we decode the source material today, you'll see we're unraveling a story where the real puzzle isn't just who is killing the monks, but how we interpret the signs, the words, and literally the entire world around us.
To really get this story, we've got to ground ourselves in the setting first. Think back to the year 1327. It's a time of immense theological conflict. The fear of heresy, the Inquisition, and the literal end of the world just totally permeated everyday life. It's a dark, superstitious era, and it's exactly against this backdrop of apocalyptic dread that our detective story kicks off. And over the course of just 7 days, this remote monastery is absolutely rocked by an escalating timeline of grisly murders. I mean, first, Adelmo falls from a tower, then Venantius is found dead in a vat of pig's blood, Berenger is poisoned in a bath, Severinus is struck down in his herbery, and Malachi drops dead with blackened fingers. It's intense. Eco is masterfully playing with classic 1930s mystery tropes here, maps, cryptograms, locked room puzzles, to build a completely captivating surface-level plot. But he's really just using those familiar mechanics to pull us into a much, much deeper game. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Holmes versus Occam. Two approaches to truth.
To solve all these grisly murders, Eco gives us a really fascinating protagonist, the Franciscan friar William of Baskerville. Now, that name is a deliberate nod to Arthur Conan Doyle's famous detective, Sherlock Holmes. But William is definitely not just a medieval Sherlock. See, Holmes is famously arrogant. He relies on what he calls the science of deduction and basically claims he's infallible. Eco actually points out that Holmes's famous deductions often rely on pretty flawed logic. But William of Baskerville? He embraces humility. He uses a philosophical method called abduction, which is essentially making highly educated guesses. He knows he can fail, and honestly, that makes him profoundly human. So where does William get his investigative style? It comes directly from his real-life friend and mentor in the novel, the radical philosopher William of Occam. You've probably heard of his famous principle, Occam's razor. Basically, it states that you shouldn't multiply explanations unless it's strictly necessary. Keep it simple, right? Cut out the extra unnecessary assumptions. Baskerville essentially uses this philosophical razor to just slice right through the elaborate, superstitious medieval dogma of the monastery to get to the raw truth of the murders. And that brings us to another really key concept from Occam that Baskerville uses, which is nominalism. This is the belief that only individual things exist, not these grand universal essences. So why does a philosophical concept matter in a murder mystery? Well, because it completely changes how William sees people. While the traditionalist monks at the Abbey view women through these rigid, highly sexist archetypes, either as pure saints or diabolical temptresses, Baskerville's nominalism makes him kind of a proto-feminist. When a poor peasant girl is unjustly punished, he's literally the only one who sees her as an individual human being who is actually suffering, rather than just some universal symbol of sin. Moving right along to Section 2, the Labyrinth of Symbols and Decoding the World. This whole idea of how we interpret people leads us straight to the core intellectual concept of the novel. We have to remember that Umberto Eco was actually a highly renowned professor of semiotics, which is the study of signs and symbols and how we interpret them to create meaning. So this entire murder investigation, it's not just about looking for muddy footprints, it's a profound exercise in decoding symbols. William isn't just reading crime scenes, he's reading his entire environment as if it were a language. And this brilliantly illustrates a concept going all the way back to the 12th century thinker, Alain de Lille. He wrote that the world is like a vast text, or a picture, basically a mirror for us. Eco and his detective fundamentally agree that our primary task on Earth is learning the rules for reading this text of the world around us. To them, everything is a clue, and everything has meaning if we just know how to read it. But here's the catch. Reading those signs is incredibly dangerous and confusing. Eco represents this physically through the monastery's secret library, which is built as an actual, literal labyrinth. This maze of rooms and mirrors is a powerful metaphor for just how difficult it is to interpret signs. It's so complex that even our brilliant detective gets completely lost in it. In fact, William pursues a false, apocalyptic pattern to the murders for almost the entire story, totally misinterpreting the signs the killer is actually leaving behind. Section 3. The danger of certainty and the hoarding of truth. Let's move to and see how this builds. This brings us face to face with the true antagonist of the story, the blind librarian Jorge of Burgos, and his completely twisted understanding of corruption. Baskerville observes that there are actually many types of lust, well beyond just the physical. I mean, there's the Inquisitor's distorted lust for power disguised as justice, and then there is Jorge's sterile lust for books. Think about it. The library was meant to share knowledge, but Jorge's lust turned it into a locked vault. As Baskerville notes, the library became a sink of iniquity, not because of any physical desires, but because of this obsessive hoarding of truth. So what does this all mean for the mystery? Well, here is the ultimate shocking twist. The murder weapon wasn't a sword, it wasn't a blunt object, it was a book. Specifically, the poisoned pages of Aristotle's legendary lost manuscript on comedy. The monks were dying simply because they licked their fingers to turn the pages of a book about laughter. No way, right? But Jorge poisoned it because he was absolutely terrified of laughter. He genuinely believed that if people could laugh at everything, they would lose their fear of God. And without fear, the rigid religious authority he represented would just completely collapse. This massive ideological clash culminates in an absolutely incredible climax. During a struggle, the poisoned pages get eaten, a lantern is knocked over, and the greatest library in Christendom literally burns to the ground. This raging fire symbolizes the violent destruction of that rigid medieval worldview. But it also represents the destruction of Baskerville's own intellectual pride. Our great detective failed to save the books because he was forcing his own complex, elaborate theories onto a killer whose motive was actually shockingly simple. Standing there amidst the ashes, Baskerville comes to a pretty profound realization. He says, "The only truth lies in learning to free ourselves from the insane passion for the truth." He realizes that dogmatic, absolute certainty, the exact kind of certainty that makes men willing to kill and burn down libraries, is hands down the most dangerous thing in the world. He concludes that the mission of those who truly love humanity is to make truth laugh, maintaining a healthy skepticism, even of our own most deeply held beliefs. Which brings us to Section 4, Echoes in the Present, a modern mirror. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that Eco didn't just write this as a history lesson for the 14th century, he wrote it to hold a mirror right up to our world today. When he was asked about the setting, Eco explicitly stated that our modern era is really no better than the Middle Ages. I mean, we're still plagued by dictatorships that burn books. We still face constant struggles with censorship, and we still share the world with people who believe certain texts are just too dangerous for the public. The costumes might have changed, but that lust to hoard and control information, that remains exactly the same. Now, this explainer has really only scratched the surface of what is truly a masterpiece. Eco deliberately designed this novel as a postmodern machine for generating interpretations. Literally, every time you read it, you decode something completely new. It absolutely refuses to offer you a comfortable, neat resolution where good cleanly triumphs over evil. Instead, it challenges our own modern arrogance, reminding us that our understanding of the world is always filtered, it's always fallible, and it is always subject to the signs we choose to read. Which brings us to a final thought for you to carry forward. We might no longer have medieval abbeys hiding ancient scrolls, but we do have digital paywalls, we have algorithms that trap us in echo chambers, and we have massive entities fighting to control the flow of data. So I want to ask you, in our modern world, who are the blind librarians guarding your knowledge today? And maybe more importantly, are you using your own Occam's razor to cut through their dogma? Think about that next time you read the signs around you. Thanks for exploring with me today.